So welcome to the last of our 4 videos linked to blogs about rising up ready for September. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at the importance of empathy and emotion and how we respond to some of those negative circuits in our safety circuits in the amygdala we've talked about over the last few videos. So how should we respond as a neuro ninja? Well, it's basically understanding that whatever happens, our emotion brain is going to get the information first. So we've got to respond by noticing those emotions. So we're going to need to get better at a series of skills: emotional granularity, emotional agility, and emotional hygiene. We're going to talk all about those and the importance of empathy and developing a really powerfully positive relationship with ourselves. Not, dancing through the flower meadows positive where we just think we're fantastic and we can't improve, but supportive rather than beating ourselves up when we're having a difficult situation. And a reminder before we dive in of the importance of cake, because this is one of those skills that lifts us into our thinking part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex. So we're contemplating September, we're getting a bit steamed up about it, we're getting a bit worried about it because our circuits are firing off in our amygdala, and then we think common humanity, everyone's feeling like this right now, awareness and acceptance, kind curiosity, go in search of the trigger thought or the trigger feeling, and empathy. Empathy is critical and crucial. So understanding what empathy is really important, and understanding the difference between empathy and sympathy. So sympathy is like, yeah, they're there, kind of really sorry to hear that. Empathy is feeling that experience, and that is really important. Feeling with the person, and actually, if that person's us, feeling with us as well. The problem that we face is that all the time we're sitting in those emotion circuits in the back of our brain, we're not experiencing empathy towards ourselves. Empathy sits in the front of our brain. So understanding what empathy is and practicing empathy towards ourselves and other people is a really important skill, because the more we use certain skills, the stronger they get.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So that's fundamentally important as we're thinking about preparing for September, is connecting with our friends, connecting with our parents, our carers, our teachers, and talking through any worries that we've got, because all of that stuff lifts us into that top bit of our brain. So we need to get better at responding positively to some negative emotions. And as we saw in that first video, we've got more negative emotions available because that kept our ancestors alive in a dangerous ancestral environment. And we saw in video 3 about the 12 rocks of well-being, emotions are really important, managing our emotions effectively, particularly negative emotions, noticing, accepting, and sharing those negative emotional experiences. Because one of the issues we face is that our brain not only has those emotional experiences, but then it can brood upon them and go back over them. And psychologists make a distinction between the pain of the event itself, like, we're a bit nervous about going back to school, but that's going to be really positive as well. There's lots of positives, but psychologists make a distinction between the pain of the event itself and then brooding on it. And it's really important that we notice if we're ruminating, if we're going back over and over and putting ourselves back through kind of worries. And remember what we said about cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions worried about things that are unlikely to happen, but because our amygdala is using that cognitive distortion as an alert to wake the whole brain up. So thinking about emotional pain in terms of clean pain and dirty pain. And let's just explore that idea briefly.
The secrets to dealing with emotional pain, to processing that pain and then moving on, come in two varieties, and they rhyme. One is grieving, and the other is disbelieving. Now, grieving is how you handle what some psychologists call clean pain. Let me differentiate clean pain from dirty pain. Clean pain arises from events. So if I came up and slapped you, that would hurt. Clean pain. Dirty pain arises not from events, but from our thoughts about events. So the slap would hurt, and that's clean pain. But any thoughts you had that caused further suffering, like she slapped me because I'm bad, I'm going to get slapped again, all women slap people, I didn't deserve to be slapped, this is horrible. Those thoughts create a lot of further suffering, and that some psychologists call dirty pain. Now, clean pain must be grieved. If you've lost a loved one, you are going to go through the grieving process, and that's going to be a tumultuous process of anger, sadness, denial, acceptance. Supposedly they come in a list, but actually it's just a big cement mixer of feelings. It happens. But if you allow it to happen without restraining it, the intense emotions surge in about 90 seconds, and then they recede. It's interesting to me that that's about the length of the most intense contraction when you're giving birth as well, 90 seconds. So if you resist grieving, it can last for many, many years as unexpressed or repressed pain. If you allow it to flow, it peaks and recedes in about 90 seconds. So that's grieving. Now, dirty pain, that has to be disbelieved. So, for example, I have a son with Down syndrome. When he was diagnosed, I had to grieve the loss of the normal baby I thought I was going to have. But then I had to disbelieve a lot of things that were in my head causing dirty pain. Thoughts like, his life is going to be unhappy because he has Down syndrome. No woman will ever love him because he has Down syndrome. It's a terrible thing to be mentally retarded. These were all things that I had solidly as beliefs that were causing me great suffering, and none of them are true. And I had to learn to dissolve those beliefs in order to be free from my dirty pain.
So, really important idea, the ability of the brain to generate a bunch of negative thinking. We looked at that in an earlier video. We need to respond to that in the way that we might respond to cleaning out kind of difficult sort of experiences in our minds. We need to respond in the way we might brush our teeth every day. Physical hygiene, we don't think twice about physical hygiene. We brush our teeth, we have a shower. Emotional hygiene, remembering the area of the brain that registers physical pain and emotional pain is the same area. So what is that? Basically, it's a set of questions we ask ourselves. What happened today? How did I feel? What emotions were involved? Book a time, 6:30 in the evening, sit down and have a chat. What happened today? How did I feel? What emotions were involved? That supports the brain to process its emotions. If we can't process our emotions, we get stuck with them. And that skill of processing emotions, beginning to think, well, I'm feeling like this now. What emotion is that? That is a skill called emotional granularity. A skill like emotional hygiene we should have been taught at school. Emotional granularity, emotional hygiene, and you are now being taught at school by all the wonderful schools that work with us. So emotional pain can stop us enjoying our lives. It can stop us remembering important information. It can stop us learning. It can stop us making progress. It is as powerful an impact on our output mentally as toothache is. Imagine trying to do maths tests with toothache. Emotional pain has a similar kind of output. So this means that sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me is not true, actually. It's really important that we listen to that voice in our heads and we aren't just agreeing with the negative output that it gives. So emotional granularity is the skill of being able to name our difficult emotions. If we can name an emotion, we can tame that emotion and move beyond it. So the daily life experiment in relation to emotional granularity is build emotional granularity by acknowledging your emotions and start by understanding how you deal with your emotions right now. Are you a bottler? Do you hold them in? Are you a brooder? Do you go back over and over them? Explore the other videos to kind of understand that idea of bottling, holding emotion in, brooding, going back over and over it in that kind of dirty pain. The best response is showing up, noticing emotions, and that's a skill called emotional agility, which is basically just acknowledging that our emotions are going to move all over the place every single day, and we're going to be shifted by experiences, because emotion is the first pass of the brain about any experience. So we can't remain in a perfect mood the entire time, because emotions are partly about a response to the environment. And it's really important to remember the power of sleep in terms of processing emotion. Good sleep helps us process emotion effectively. So try to practice emotional agility every day. And emotional agility is saying, I am noticing that I am feeling anxious. I am noticing that I'm feeling angry. I am noticing that I'm feeling sad. And using kind of that cake idea of kind curiosity, go in search of what it was that moved us into that space. And think about our emotions as an ocean, the emotion ocean, and responding differently. So how do you talk to yourself when you're struggling? If you're like any of us, you might beat yourself up when you're having a tricky time. And it's really important to understand that self-compassion is the solution to that negative brooding, that dirty pain. It doesn't mean you think you're fantastic. It just means you think you're okay, actually, and that you deserve sort of sympathy, empathy, support. You don't deserve to be punished by those negative thoughts. It's really important to develop the skills of self-compassion. And self-compassion is a daily habit. It's reminding ourselves of the good things that we've experienced during the day. It's reminding ourselves of the things we're grateful for. And it's listening when we're struggling to that negative voice, but not agreeing with it, and responding back and saying, no, actually, you know, I am suffering now and I can see that I'm suffering. We've got to build those circuits, those empathy circuits in the front of our head. And we do that by exercising those empathy circuits through kind of daily gratitude, which is rock number 10. If you're really interested in the idea of self-compassion, there's a great American psychologist called Kristin Neff. She's written a great book about self-compassion. And here she is describing what self-compassion is.
What is self-compassion?
Well, I think it's usually easier for people to understand what self-compassion is if they think of what it feels like to have compassion for others, which is more familiar. So let's say you've got a good friend who you're very close to, and she tells you something that's gone wrong in her life, or maybe she's made some big mistake, blown it on a work assignment. So if you have compassion for your friend, the first thing is you're tuned into her suffering. I mean, maybe your friend doesn't even say she's upset, but you just notice the way she looks, and you say, oh, what's wrong? Tell me about it. So you've got to notice that she's suffering first, and then in response to that suffering, you have to be kind, caring, supportive, try to comfort your friend, soothe her, let her know that it's okay, let her know that you still care. And then finally, it's important to remember that suffering is part of the human experience. You might say to your friend, oh, it's only human, it happens to all of us. It's an experience that we all share, so your friend doesn't feel isolated in her suffering. So compassion really involves three basic components: noticing suffering, being kind and caring in response to that suffering, and remembering that imperfection is part of the human experience, something we all share.
And is this the...
So that's what compassion is, and self-compassion is applying those experiences to ourselves. Now, you might be sitting there, if you're a boy listening to this and thinking, well, that, I can't do all that. I can't do emotion like that. I can't do that. Well, actually, you can and you must. The sort of toxic version of responses to emotion that we've got out there, it's just not helpful, actually. Managing our emotion is really, really important. You're not tough if you don't manage your emotions effectively. If you go around shouting and being aggressive, that's not tough. That means you're carrying around a bunch of emotional pain. You're bottling it and you're not dealing with it. You're ending up damaging relationships. It's just not a positive thing. It will hold you back. It won't support you. So get with the plan. Get with the neuroscience. When our brain comes across a situation where it can't work out what's going to happen, it experiences uncertainty. And boy, is there a lot of uncertainty out there. That's what this series of blogs has all been about. You've got to understand that you have got a particular level of tolerance of uncertainty. We're all on a spectrum. Some of us love roller coasters. Some of us think trying a new coffee is a massive risk. And we're somewhere on that spectrum. So we have to start where we are. The 21st century offers us lots of volatility, lots of uncertainty, lots of complexity, lots of ambiguity. All of those things upset the amygdala, upset those emotion circuits. So going out into the 21st century every day is going to make those bits of our brain wobble, but almost all new experiences nowadays are actually beneficial. So we need to understand that anxiety is a normal response of the human brain to new situations. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. It means our brain is functioning normally. It becomes a problem when we get stuck in that space. And there are lots of hints in these videos, lots of things that you can try. There's lots of resources. And if you're really struggling, if you're feeling really low, and I'm really sorry to hear that, get in contact with us and we can either support you ourselves or signpost you to people that can support you. Don't forget cake when you experience anxiety. Common humanity, awareness, acceptance, kind, curiosity, and empathy. And remember, there's this conversation going on between the amygdala, which spots the uncertainty, and the prefrontal cortex, which ultimately soothes it down. The prefrontal cortex teaches the amygdala what not to be frightened of. So what can we do to expand our experience, to give our prefrontal cortex the opportunity to calm our amygdala down? We can do new stuff. We can step into growth. We can step into places of discomfort, not where we're massively overwhelmed by the discomfort. Think back to those things you've done where you were nervous about them beforehand, like scout camp, or nervous about that sleepover with those people you didn't know very well, and actually it was a fantastic experience. That is where your prefrontal cortex has come in and calmed your amygdala down. So remember, how we think about our emotions and our thoughts can affect the level of stress we feel. And if we're going to grow, we should design desirable difficulties. These are basically bits of experience that put us slightly outside our comfort zone. So, in order to grow, we need to get into that learning zone. We have to come through that fear zone. So if you're thinking about something and you're thinking, well, I don't really want to do that, and you're making loads of excuses, that's precisely probably what you do need to do. You need to break down those experiences that make us worry into small, digestible chunks. So I'll give you an example. A very inspiring 8-year-old girl I worked with a year or so ago, painfully shy, just found meeting new people really awfully difficult. So we just worked on going into a shop and buying something at the counter, talking to the person behind the counter. We scripted what you do in the queue. We spent a while building calming down strategies to help her, deep breathing, etc. And she did it. She was fantastic. And then she went on to something else and something else. Slowly but surely, you can get in charge of those responses. So you step into growth and you step outside your comfort zone. Remember, your boundary in terms of tolerance and uncertainty is different to other people's. But wherever we step, we can support ourselves to grow, learn about ourselves, and we're living in this beautifully neurally plastic brain, so we can use our mind to change our brain. So the final bit of homework is practice self-compassion through making a note of good experiences and what you're grateful for every day. Self-compassion means we can struggle for longer, more successfully. Get in touch. Any worries that you've got about September, you can do this. It is going to be amazing. The opportunity to grow and learn, and you've got an amazing brain. You've now got the information you need to be the best version of yourselves every day. Enjoy school. Enjoy September. Be a neuro ninja.